Amen. Please sit. I was remembering this week the first time that I came and did something at the front of church. I don't know how you feel if you were asked to come and do a reading or something. I know for many it's we actually kind of get our fears going. I remember I came because I played the piano, so I was asked to play for a service, and I remember my my feelings of fear, and then kind of getting there and kind of not quite playing as I might usually do, but at least I kind of made it there. It's quite fearful because it wasn't quite as exposed as this piano is now here, but it always feels more exposed at the front. You know, everyone's looking at me. Will I get it right? And I remember my first sermon, which was when I was a student in Coventry, and putting all the effort in to try and make sure every word was there, and had I remembered everything, and would people understand, and had I looked at the passage enough, and you kind of work yourself into a bit of a state of and I'm still remembering back some of those kind of fears kind of come back. But thankfully, at least I kind of kept going through the anxieties, which, of course, continue in different ways. But there had to be that journey through what was a very generous offer to kind of do something, but didn't feel necessarily that easy. And of course, in those days, I was incredibly quiet and quiet, and wouldn't do much in terms of talking out. So it was a real challenge to what I felt I was able to do. Well, this morning, in partly the readings and partly through we're following a series on pastoral principles, the theme set for today was living well together beyond fear, beyond those things that we're fearful about, which is easier to say than it is to live out. So, as I was saying to someone earlier, it's if you want some answers, then I'm here seeking alongside you for ways through fear, because fear is a reality of life. It's something that comes quite naturally because there are things we do that are different, and sometimes we just have to journey through what is there. Sometimes we don't have any choice. Sometimes we do have a choice. And maybe it's wise just to say, I won't be doing this or that at the moment, and leave it for the minute. But there is that encouragement to journey through our fears. And in the Pastoral Principles, which is a Church of England course, that's particularly come out of listening to people of different sexualities and genders. It's really coming out of those who feel the fear of whether or not they are able to admit who they are to others. And that is a fear that's more inside. It's because often they feel the church or others, in a much wider sense than just All Saints, has made them feel uncomfortable and afraid of admitting who they are. And so today's theme is encouraging us to think not just for ourselves and our fear, but also the fears that others have, and thinking, how can we help others work through? How can we just be aware that they're there, they're living with different fear? Actually, as I was preparing this, I spoke to someone this week who was asking about one of the occasional offices, and asked if one of their friends could be involved. But they then turned to me rather hesitantly and said, but the church may not want her because she's lesbian. And I thought that was just so tragic. But that's, there was someone there for whom fear of what they'd heard, not particularly from here, it was sort of a more general thing, but had heard that the church, didn't want them as a person. Of course, there were plenty of debates going on, but for someone to feel unwanted and living with that kind of fear, which only because of that particular service that they're going to be part of, were they able to own it. So I said, yes, of course, and had to sort of explore why and apologise for some of the way church is. A journey beyond fear is a journey that takes time, and the encouragement in this series is just to acknowledge that some of those backgrounds and those experiences exist for us or for others, and find ways of building confidence that we can be who we are even if who we are, of course, is often being worked out over time. Journeying beyond fear. Of course, the reading set, particularly the first reading from Psalm 27, is set in a situation of extreme fear that seems pointedly relevant to the wider world of today. It's the reading that was read by the Ukrainian bishop that were in a service in London that we repeated parts of here when we were praying for the Ukraine. In Ukraine, there is, of course, an army besieging, war breaking out, to use the verses 2 and 3. The wicked advance against me to devour me. It somehow seems to summarize Ukraine and these news headlines that we have day by day. The awfulness of what must it be like, the very real fears of loss of life and family, the right decisions to flee. Fear in the images of people caught in the bunkers, wondering what's going on outside. Can they risk going to the shops? The fear of those in this country waiting to hear from relatives who haven't been able to be in touch. It's a story, a psalm of extreme fear. And of course, like all of the psalms, it doesn't necessarily give an easy and straightforward answer. It almost puts us in the place that we are, which is one of crying out honestly to say, this is awful. How, Lord, can it be otherwise? There's an honesty in this psalm like every other that says this is what it's like. The wicked are advancing. The army is besieging. And the psalmist goes further and says not only does it affect what they see outside themselves, but it also affects them inside in their fears, but also in their faith in God. The psalmist is able to say, Lord, do not hide your face from me. Do not reject me or forsake me. It's almost as if he's hearing in himself, I'm wondering if my faith is up to this. It feels like God has rejected me. That's why people ask questions about how can we have faith in a world of such mindless violence. They're the right questions, but we bring them like the psalmist into the place of God, the place of faith, in which questions, longings, anger and frustration are just part of our vocabulary of prayer. That's what we bring. And that's why the psalmist here works through that. And obviously over time, and it is over time because the psalm finishes with those words, wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. If you ever look through the book of Psalms, whenever it says wait, there's often more than most of us would like. We're not very good at waiting. At least I'm not. I want it sorted now, please. Can I just organise this? Can't we just get a solution now? But he says, wait for the Lord. There's an awful lot of waiting without the answer, without the solution, but in the honesty of just saying, this is where we are. Wait for the Lord. But there's that hint in there, and the psalmist, as he does that, as he's honest with God, and presumably honest with others, because psalms were often said together as community, as nation. Together there is that sense of encouragement and journey where he's able to say, be strong and take heart. Take heart inside. Outwardly there's so much that's going wrong, but inside we can take heart. It's a journey. That's why it says, one thing I ask of the Lord, this do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So it's a very literal thing. It was talking about going to the temple in Jerusalem, where people went to pray, and places like this. People come because it's good to have a place that's well prayed in, that we can feel, even if it doesn't have all the answers, it's in the presence of a God who's been worshipped, who carries us. But there's also something inwardly where the psalmist is saying, inside ourselves, we know that the Lord is with us. Sometimes it may be just repeating the start of this verse. The Lord is my light and my salvation. The Lord is my stronghold, the stronghold of my life. That's sometimes what people of faith do. They repeat those words. Jesus did it on the cross, of course, with Psalm 21. repeating a verse, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Sometimes we hang on to a promise. And as we hang on to one verse, so the rest of the psalm comes to us and allows us that honesty, that waiting, that frustration, that prayer, but comes back to the one thing: the Lord is with me. That's why in Romans we have the Spirit of God leading us, the Holy Spirit of love. As it says elsewhere, love drives out all fear. It's only the presence of God inside that provides something beyond us, someone beyond us, who is able to give enough love that we can struggle through our fears. Of course, for most of us, our fears are thankfully less extreme than those in Ukraine. But still, they are fears. And we need the honesty. I live with different fears each week. There's something inside which is often difficult. We may struggle for different reasons. I was talking to a teacher this week who was saying, well, the mental health toil on all of the students that he teaches after the pandemic is so large, he didn't almost know where to start. Often it is the image that we have of fear sort of boxing us in, which we've had literally, haven't we, in the pandemic, and not being able to get out. We feel like we withdraw a little bit more into ourselves, into our safe place, wherever that may be. It may be our home or maybe our friends. It's somehow we kind of get back into a smaller and smaller place. But of course the problem with that is we then feel the pressure. You know, we want to get out, but we're worried. You know, what about the infection rates? What about if I get it? What about, you know, and there is a right need to face our fears. And of course, our fears may be real and may be warranted, and we may just need to be very wise in what we do and don't do. But these readings encourage us to journey through our fears. As I say, it's easier to say than it is to do. But there's something here at least of holding to the Lord who's with us, about being honest and saying, this is how I feel. Sometimes we just need the confidence to be honest with someone else that we know and say, actually, I'm feeling fearful of this. I'm struggling. It feels like life has crushed in and I just don't know the way out. You know, my mind goes round and round. I can't quite hold on to anything at the minute, and I just need some way. We need to try and put into words, if we can, the struggle that we may feel. And there's no quick solution. Wait on the Lord is not a quick solution, but it is that we keep coming as we do Sunday by Sunday. We keep picking up the Bible and reading, and we think, what can I hold on to this week? And even if you just take the readings sheet home with you and look at it during the week and pick perhaps one verse, the Lord is my light and my salvation, and just hold on to it, that's something practically that you and I can do this week, to hold on to the good of the Lord who's with us. We may not feel we're quite in the psalmist's place, the Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The fears may still be there, but we can at least echo something of what the psalmist says. And so we can move forwards. And of course we then hear stories that encourage us. Maybe someone we know we've been praying for, you know, maybe there's some good news. And we just are encouraged and feel, well, that's an answer to prayer, and we relax a little bit. Maybe we hear stories from Ukraine. Nick was sharing a story this week, I hope you don't mind, Nick, of one of the relatives who managed to get out of Ukraine. An amazing, amazing story. There's some stories where the generosity of others has just been overwhelming, where the people have been in the right place at the right time to welcome those who are fleeing for their lives. Someone we know has set up a sanctuary organisation encouraging organisations, churches and individuals to support Ukrainian refugees. And it's got an incredibly positive response. Yes, some negatives, but overall people are saying, here's someone who's at least trying to offer something positive. There are signs in which God has answered prayer and raised up, and sometimes miraculously, sometimes in ordinary ways, led people beyond fear. Not that everything is then easy, because it isn't, but there has been a lifting of the fear that gripped them. There is something of good news, even amidst all the horrible news of this time. And of course, Jesus is the example of working through fear in this Lenten season. It's the walk to the cross in which the fear of death is reality for Jesus. And he admits that if only this could be taken away from me, he prays very honestly in the Garden of Gethsemane. And yet there's also glimpses, like in the Gospel reading, of Jesus heading towards Jerusalem and death, but still beyond fear. I mean, he's giving the example that may seem way beyond us, because he's reached the point where he can pray compassionately even for those who will commit the violence. Even on those, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I've longed to gather you together. And yet, your house is left desolate. There's something in Jesus' heart of a longing beyond violence, a longing to transform the lives of even those who are committed to violence, the enemies. To love our enemies is so characteristic of Christian faith, and yet so much beyond what many of us have got to. But there's something in this gospel reading of a Jesus who keeps going, who is honest, but keeps going, and has reached a point even of being able to reach out in compassion to those who are his enemies. So, casting out fear. It feels like words are never enough, because it's an emotion, it's a thought, it's a process, it's a journey. But maybe from these readings we can all be encouraged to wait for the Lord. To just be honest in our waiting in God's presence and say, this is how I am. Be honest enough to look to others and think, well, maybe they're living with fears. Maybe they're needing to just be honest and say things that I might find difficult, but they need to say them, and that's all right. Maybe we even glimpse Jesus in love for enemies. But there's something about waiting on the Lord and praying for the Holy Spirit of love to cast out fear and to bring his goodness and love into our lives and this world that so desperately needs it. So, loving Jesus, be with us this day. Grant us that miraculous provision of your Spirit. Bring peace to hearts and minds, rescue to those in desperate need, and your guidance in the ordinary and difficult places of our lives. For Jesus' sake.